everybody. Today's video, we are just discussing the difference between a sports hernia and a groin strain. We will just describe how it can feel, what you might come across in the medical field as far as explanations, diagnosis, imaging, all kinds of good stuff. So stick around if you feel like being educated. Hey everyone, my name is Dawn and this is Mandy.
Hi.
And we are just two parts of the locally world famous chiropractors here in Costa Mesa, California. And we're just hopping right into a discussion about sports hernia and groin strain today.
Yeah.
Do you think they're different?
I think they can be confused and they can be different, but they're not always.
Okay.
So groin is kind of a general term for this region of the body, but there's actually several muscles within it. And those muscles have some overlap with the structures we talk about with sports hernia. So groin strains, typically we have that same area of pain. We're talking about right in here, right in the hip crease, maybe even referred a little bit up, but usually if we're a little bit up, we're talking about sports hernia rather than down lower, we're talking about groin strain. Groin strain only will be down here versus sports hernia will not.
There you go. So we're going to bring our little Bob Norman guy into here just to show you on a skeleton. I know that white on a white wall back there is not the greatest, but typically with sports hernia, and correct me if your understanding is a little different at all, because this is what we're seeing in the medical community is that everybody's understanding is different.
Yes.
So purpose of today's video is just a discussion on some of this stuff. So when we're talking about sports hernia, we're talking about abdominal muscles up here. This is ribs coming down and attaching right into the pubic bone here. So those six back muscles that attach there, there's a tendon that attaches to the top of the pubic bone here. You might even be able to touch it. You just start at the belly button, palpate your way down. There might be some tenderness down into here. The attachment at the pubic bone there, some tearing of that tendon is technically a sports hernia. Am I correct in saying that?
Yep. And you'll see that if you look it up in the medical literature and all that. People call sports hernias different things, so there's no real consensus on what it is, but this is what we are calling a sports hernia, is that fraying of the muscle or that aponeurosis down in that area.
Absolutely. So when we think hernia, we think abdominal hernia, inguinal hernia.
Yep.
Typically you can see bulging somewhere around the abdomen area. And that's where the abdominal contents are coming through the wall. They have torn through it. And so those are what we're thinking of when we're thinking of true hernias, and there's different kinds. A sports hernia doesn't have anything really to do with the abdominal contents coming through. So if there is a bulging, it's not a sports hernia we're dealing with, and it's not a groin strain that we're dealing with at all.
Yeah, so for some reason it's called sports hernia, but there's no herniation. So somebody probably just made up that term and maybe confused the two and it stuck. So the term is sports hernia, but again, there's no palpable divot. There's no intestines coming out of your body. If you look at it, there's no change. You're just feeling pain in that area.
Absolutely. So what do these typically feel like that you've seen?
Most people feel pain when they're rotating. Some people, when they're rolling over in bed, feel this kind of achy or sharp pain down in the lower abdominal region. Same thing. But mostly, yeah, twisting, sometimes leg lifts really hurt.
Yeah.
But it stays pretty local in that region.
Absolutely. And some of the things that we may notice with a groin strain is actually a little further down. So kind of like we mentioned earlier, it's going to be more into the inner thigh here, somewhere in the crease of the groin here. Typically the attachment of these muscles on the inner thigh to, again, the pubic bone is more of that groin strain that we're talking about as well. So things like squatting, maybe running, sprinting, getting up and out of bed, trying to do abdominal exercises. Again, not seeing any bulging of any of that, but that's what's reproducing some of your discomfort is what we're seeing with true sports hernias or groin strains. They can kind of go hand in hand like we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I've seen in the research more recently that there are some there's some things that could perpetuate more of a sports hernia. Lack of hip extension and lack of hip internal rotation. Can you show them what that looks like?
Yeah, so hip extension, we're talking about leg going behind your body. So this would be hip extension. And then internal rotation would be here. So heel outside of your body. Because if those things are limited, it ends up dumping that load into that sports hernia section. So say your hip can't go like this and we're stuck here. And you need to go backwards for some reason, say something's coming at you and you need to get away from it, all of that load is going to go into this region, maybe, and we're going to potentially get pain fraying, even muscular damage into that sports hernia region. Same thing with internal rotation. Again, that's this. That is coupled with this motion. So if we don't have this, we probably don't have a ton of this. And same thing, we're just going to be stretching all of this area whenever we need to go backwards.
Yep. I think I see this traditionally in soccer players. With that back swinging leg, or even I'm sure you see this in runners with needing to push off that back leg and not having proper extension. So what she was showing there, where you're trying to find movement somewhere else in the body because we're lacking it in the hip joint, yes, tearing of that can occur, but there are some other things that can produce pain, and we're not going to dive too deep into this video, but what are some other things that we traditionally see in the hip joint that can maybe feel like this, but it's not a sports hernia or a groin strain?
Yeah, we have a couple of different categories, and we have a couple different categories, and we actually have a webinar and a book that just came out on sports hernias and goes super in detail about what all pain in this region could be. Some of the big ones that we see is what we call a pseudo-sports hernia, and that is actually referred pain from the back into the hip crease area. And that may be from like a lumbar disc, it could be a facet, from the low back into the front of the abdomen here. That's really common, especially if you're feeling it jump sides or if it's on both sides at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. And I do see that some people will tell me, well, I don't have any back pain, so could it be coming from my back still?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You don't have to have back pain for this to be coming from your low back. So these are some things that we definitely will dive into if at any point you decide you want to come in, or maybe you're seeing somebody near you. Just ask these questions. I think it's really important to just make sure that we're ruling out all possible causes, especially if you've been dealing with this for a long time. You've tried PT and rehab and it just doesn't seem to be working for you. Maybe it's not a groin strain or a sports hernia that you're dealing with, and maybe we just need to rule out some other areas that could be contributing.
Yeah.
Another thing too, just being more more internal hip joint issues like hip impingement.
Yep.
Or labral issues. They can present themselves around this area as well. So there's some other videos on that. You can go on our YouTube channel, search in there, labral tear, hip pain, lower abdominal pain, all that stuff will come up. There's some self-tests on there, some exercises that you can try. If you're tired of trying to self-diagnose and figure out what to do on your own, reach out to us. We'd love to guide you in the right direction virtually or in person. We're available via phone call or email.
Yep, and just some key takeaways for this. If you have pain in this abdominal region, lower abdomen, and you don't see a palpable, or some key takeaways from this, if you have pain in the lower abdomen region and you don't see any obvious defects, so nothing's herniating through and you don't have a divot there, and especially if you're feeling this while you're twisting or doing complex movements, reach out to us. This very much could be a sports hernia, but we'd want to go through a full exam and get you going on treatment.